Hi, folks. The Filipina Pea here. And I've been covering some pretty heavy topics lately: poverty, the transmission of disease, getting blacklisted from the country. So today I thought I'd change gears a little. I'm gonna do something I rarely do and tell you some very intimate things about my life that I've never discussed publicly. Get ready for an earful, and hopefully, you'll still be subscribed to my channel after what you're about to hear. Sometimes I read comments that say, P, I really appreciate all the subjects you cover, and I'm learning so much about the Philippines. But what about you? Well, as most of you know, I prefer to keep my private life private. But today I'm going to spill the beans and tell you about the events that shaped me and made me who I am. To do that, I'm going to start with one of the most powerful emotions in anyone's life and how it's driven me to this very moment in time. And that emotion is fear. When people ask me what my biggest fear is, I often say it's my fear of heights or my fear of cockroaches. But those are just little fears. I say those things because the real answer is a lot more uncomfortable, and it forces me to think about things I'd rather forget. But today, I'm gonna let it all out. So, here's the truth. My biggest fear is not being good enough. Not good enough as a daughter. Not good enough as a student. Not good enough to be a future wife. Not good enough for anything. To explain what I mean, I have to tell you about the first 20 years of my life, all the way to today. This is stuff no one's ever heard before, so if you ever wanted to know what makes P tick, here it is. After my father died when I was 3, my mother and I were desperately poor. If I told you what we had to eat sometimes or where we had to sleep, you wouldn't believe me, so I'll spare you the details. If you know anything about the Philippines, you know it's a caste system. And unless you have wealth or amazing luck or you know the right people, you're on the bottom of the totem pole like we were. People like us are brushed aside by society, and my mom was in a bad spot as a single mother with no income. So she did what she had to do. At the age of 4, I was left in the care of a relative while my mother looked for a job as a housekeeper in the city. There was already so much turmoil and insecurity in my life after losing my dad, and being raised by some distant relative didn't help anything. Neither did the fact that every time I did the slightest little thing or didn't do the slightest little thing, depending on her mood, she would shout at me in the most unflattering terms and proceed to hit me with a broom handle. No matter how hard I tried to please her, I was told I was lazy and worthless. I was afraid to tell my mother what was going on because I was literally fearing for my life. And I didn't think my mom could have rescued me even if she wanted to. But one day, my grandparents came for a visit and they saw the purple bruises on my body. They told my mother, who immediately quit her job in the city and came back to stay with me. So, so she supported us by doing nails of other women in the neighborhood. I'm sorry. So, my mother never learned how to read or write. So when I finally started school, I was totally unprepared for what I'd be asked to do. And it didn't come naturally to me at first. In one instance, my frustrated teacher told me to stand up in front of the whole class as she smacked the desk with her ruler and demanded to know what was wrong with me because I couldn't seem to write my own freaking name. I didn't. I'm sorry. I have that moment seared into my memory for all time as I was frozen with fear and didn't know how to answer. Did she want me to say I was stupid? Or was it a rhetorical question? I stood there, paralyzed, unable to speak until she told me to take my seat. Of all people, you'd think a teacher would realize how easy it is to traumatize a child by publicly shaming them, but mine didn't know, or maybe she didn't care. Everyone in my life so far, and yes, even sometimes my own mother, had told me how worthless I was. And of course, I believed it. I just wasn't good enough for anything. So at this point, I'd had as bad a childhood as a kid can have. But then a funny thing happened. As my schooling continued, I found out I was pretty good at it. I not only became the first person in my family that could read and write, but it turned out I was faster than other kids when it came to math and science and history and all other subjects as well. I felt, I felt like I'd suddenly redeemed myself, and I was more excited to go to school than I'd ever been about anything else in my life. But even back then, I knew that my time in the spotlight was only temporary. There's not a lot of opportunity here in the Philippines unless, you have the money to continue to law school or, med school, and I barely had enough to feed myself. If I was lucky, I'd end up with a baby in each arm by the time I was 25, so I'd have someone to take care of me when I get too old to have a job. But first, you had to get chosen. The Filipinos who are fortunate enough to be born beautiful get chosen first. And they can sometimes even get out of poverty by using their looks. But I was never the pretty one, so I figured I'd just, end up just like all the other women in our hometown, working at a store at the mall for minimum wage and hoping someone would choose to love me despite my low status. After I graduated from college with a useless diploma in my hand, that was exactly the kind of job I had, working at an appliance store for 60 cents an hour and having to support my parents just like everyone else. One day, a guy came into the store, but not just any guy. He was a foreigner. Now, where I live, we didn't see that many foreigners, so you can imagine my surprise when he actually showed interest in me and asked me out. There were much prettier women all around, and although I couldn't imagine what he saw in me, I was very flattered, so I accepted his invitation. He would turn out to be my first real boyfriend as an adult. I thought this guy must have made a terrible mistake, and it was only a matter of time, before he found someone better. But since my mom had told me how to be a good future wife, I decided to try my hardest to impress him. I was determined to be the perfect girlfriend, so even though we didn't live together, I cooked for him, cleaned for him, and I gave him my heart. He didn't have much money, and in fact, he'd just been scammed out of what little he had by investing in a fake business. But for me, that was okay, because somehow in my head, we'd find a way to make our own money. We talked about our future together, and for the first time in my life, I looked forward to what was ahead. There was hope for me, and it felt like tomorrow had no limits. After almost a year together, I actually felt valued, like maybe I was good enough for someone. Until the day I found some used panties in his duffel bag that weren't mine. You might think I exploded in anger or stormed out of his apartment, but I was only 21 and dumb, in love, so I did something stupid. I tried to tell myself that I didn't see what I saw, and I thought that if only I could forget about it, somehow my paradise wouldn't come crashing down. So I kept my mouth shut. Shortly after that, he took a trip to Cebu for some minor surgery, and I decided to surprise him by going there to care for him while he is recovering. He was not happy about it, and it turned out he already had someone to fill that role. Someone who was probably missing a pair of panties, although maybe she was a totally different girlfriend, so who knows. Now I'll spare you all the drama, and believe me, there was a lot of drama. But after my world imploded, I realized that once again, I just wasn't good enough. They were right all along. I was just a silly little girl that didn't have anything to bring to the table, and I obviously couldn't even keep a man. In fact, my uncle actually told me so. He said I'd never amount to anything, and I was an idiot for letting that guy get away. Somehow, it was my fault, and part of me believed it. I buried myself in my work to support my family as best as I could. And after years of call center work, I decided I could make more money as a massage therapist. So I started the necessary training. And just as I was about to get my certification, the world went crazy. COVID hit, and non essential businesses virtually shut down overnight. Needless to say, any occupation that requires you to rub your hands all over someone else's body was out of the question. So, my massage career was dead before it even started. And by the way, guys, at this time, there was a lot of demand for massage therapists, and I was also planning to apply on a cruise ship because they were hiring massage therapists. So that was the backstory of that. Anyway, at this point, my life couldn't have sucked any worse. Not only was I isolated and unemployed, but who was gonna feed my family? I had no job, no love interest, my rent was due, and I was just about to turn the dreaded 30. So, shoot me now. But then, the most amazing thing happened. I was sitting at home in the place I shared with three other roommates, and I was watching YouTube to find a recipe for chicken parmesan. And I came across a video by a foreign expat who was talking about the Philippines. I watched it for a minute, or maybe two, and thought to myself, no, 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 that's not right. That's bad advice. And it dawned on me that I could do what they were doing, maybe even better, right from my own bedroom. I might have felt like I was a failure at everything else, but there was still one thing I had confidence in. Because of my school days, I knew I was good with words and I knew I could speak English well enough to communicate what was in my head. I'd already thought about starting a cooking channel years before, but not to make money at it, just as a hobby. And I didn't know much about monetization, but I figured I'd just give it a try. There weren't hardly any Filipino vloggers giving information to foreigners back then, so it was kind of new territory. But I got out my cell phone and laptop and introduced myself to the world of YouTube. Welcome to my brand new channel, the Filipina Pea. It's kind of hard to believe that that was me 4 years ago. It's kind of painful to watch because I was so nervous, but it marked a turning point in my life. Instead of failing, my channel took off. People started watching my videos and telling me how helpful they were. Instead of hearing how bad I was at everything, you guys were telling me that I was providing a valuable service. And after a while, it was even paying my bills. That started a whole new chapter in my life, a chapter that's still being written. But there's one more plot twist I didn't expect. One day I was answering comments and I came across one that said, P, I don't know why your video was recommended since I'm not interested in the Philippines, but I watched it anyway. I just wanted you to know that you have a very entertaining way with words. Keep up the good work. I thanked him, of course, and didn't think anything more about it. But after a few months, I saw his name in the comments section again, and we've been chatting ever since. We've actually seen each other a few times as well, and we're currently in a long-distance relationship. Now, for some odd reason, people love to speculate about my private life, and someone even made a video claiming that the man I talked to is the guy who I met at the airport during my trip to the US. But guys, I hate to tell you, that guy in my video was just an eager fan, like I said at the time. The man at the airport was a black guy in his 30s, but the guy I'm seeing is a white guy who's a lot older than him. So don't believe everything you hear. I can't say what the future will bring, but maybe someday I'll have another new chapter in the story of my life. And that brings us all the way up to the present. Did I leave out a lot? Oh, yeah, I left a bunch out. And if I ever retire from YouTube, I might even write a tell all book. But for now, this I'll have to do. So, why did I tell you all this? Well, you might look at me now and see someone who's got a bright future and a sunny personality. But on the inside, part of me is still that little girl who's frozen in fear as her teacher stands over her and tells her how stupid she is. Maybe you think I'm just telling you all this to get some sort of sympathy. But the truth is, listening to my own story is actually doing me a favor. I've never shared this stuff with anyone before. So you guys are like my therapists. In a very real way. You folks have saved me. And you're a big part of why I'm happy now. Every time you laugh at one of my jokes or tell me how much you appreciate my work, you remind me that I'm good at something after all. You heal my wound. I don't want to start to cry again. And my videos are my way of saying thank you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, guys. I appreciate you all. Now, one last thing. I'd like to do something else I've never done before. As you can imagine, I get a lot of requests for shoutouts, but that's just not something I do because then I'd have to explain to everyone else why I didn't give them a shoutout. But this case is a little different. You might have noticed that after I post a video, I give medals to the first 3 people that comment, just as a way of saying thank you for being loyal fans. And there's this one guy who keeps winning the medal, the gold medal, but he says he wants a shout out instead. Now, normally I just brush it off, but I like to reward persistence as much as loyalty. And this guy's been asking every week since last year. So here's a rare shout out to Anthony Y in San Jose, California. Now, Anthony, will you please get off my back about it? There's your shout out. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed hearing something a little different, something more personal. And if you're interested in more of my life behind the scenes, as well as news about the projects I'm working on, sign up for my Patreon page so you can hang out with me when I'm not making videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back on Friday with something new. Till then, folks. If you think about it, I'm kind of like your waitress, bringing hot, fresh content to the table and serving it to you every week. The only thing I ask for my hard work is that you leave a small tip in the form of a thumbs up on this video, a subscription to my channel, hitting the notification bell so you know when your next meal has been served, and asking you to share this video with friends. I promise, it'll only take 10 seconds to do, and your tip will make my day. You don't want to stiff your waitress, do ya? And for dessert, please enjoy my other videos too. See you real soon!